Okay, before we start, just want to get the panel to introduce themselves and one line about themselves and the company. Lara, would you start?
Yeah. So I'm Lara Islan, and my team takes care of programmatic activity from both the sell side and the buy side, as well as the activation of our first-party data through our DMP. So that's me.
Hi there, I'm Damien Burns from Atlas by Facebook. Atlas is essentially taking the measurement capabilities you see on Facebook and putting them everywhere else on the web.
Chip Skovic, I run our global enterprise sales operations, and 2Mogul sells a platform that helps advertisers manage their cross-channel marketing efforts, so planning, buying, measurement, and optimization.
And I'm David Wiener. I joined a small company called Blue Kai back in 2010, and now run product for Blue Kai, Datalogics, AdThis, and Crosswise.
Thank you, gentlemen and Laura. So we'll start with David, actually, because he's probably in the most interesting space to answer this question. We'll talk about this convergence between AdTech and Martech, right? Julie, and I'm just wondering what your perspective is as a company, from Oracle's perspective, because we see a lot of acquisitions happening, but there seems to be still this kind of Chinese wall between AdTech world and Martech world, right? You have the Martech world, which is very SaaS driven. You have the AdTech world, which is very media driven. So where does this line demarcation begin and stop?
I think we're on a collision course toward this idea of convergence. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's going to take big companies with structural assets who can tie together the Martech and the AdTech world, as well as publishers and some of the walled gardens starting to open up a little bit more. So I think a lot of this idea of convergence kicked off when platforms like Facebook started to open up the ability to target on email and sort of CRM came back from the dead as something that the ad tech industry was interested in. So yeah, I do think that this is going to be a convergence point. I think that the structural assets around tying together the ad tech world, which is used to sort of 10% lossy data transfer across the board as being acceptable, to a Martech world where that's never acceptable. That's hard. But I do think it'll happen. I also think it's going to be a battle in the CMO, the CMO's office, where they've got to figure out, what teams are responsible for Martech platforms versus ad tech platforms and those budgets that fall out of that.
We'll come back to that in a bit. Chip, thank you for making it today. I know you feel this morning.
I'm feeling pretty good.
Are you feeling good?
Yeah, I got about 3 or 4 hours on the flight.
Are you feeling pumped, as you remember?
Feeling pumped,
yeah, that's the way to have it. Here's a quick question for you. Would you consider yourself a Martech company or an AdTech company, or a bit of both?
I'd say we're a bit of both. We are traditionally known as an ad tech company, but as we push into everything that we do has a data-driven, customer-oriented approach, I think it ultimately ends up shifting to where in the way that we think about our product marketing and our positioning strategy, it does have very much more of a data-driven marketing bent to it. And when we think about television, because we've got a television planning and buying software where we're applying data to TV to get certain outcomes.
And is your aspiration to become a pure play Martech company, or do you feel the ad tech sort of slogan sort of hurts your company anyway, or is it sort of just more of a kind of a transformation thing?
Yeah, I don't. Really, only in the eyes of Wall Street is it looked at as Martech or ad tech. Typically, when we're working with brands, I don't think they necessarily make that distinction. At this stage in the game, it seems like they will work with an Oracle when they're building out their overall marketing platform strategy, and then inevitably they think I also need an advertising, so consumer-facing audience management platform, and today that does not exist in most of the Martech stacks.
Damien.
Hello, Kieran.
How are you?
I'm all right.
You're looking well.
Thank you.
Yeah, you always look sharp.
Yeah, so do you. It's a great suit.
Thanks, man. I was going to wear a V-neck, but I thought it was too hot.
I thought BHS had gone out of business.
Ooh, nasty. It's not that bad, hey. Anyway, back to the real topic
Here
here.
it starts now. Here we go.
Has Facebook got an ad tech strategy?
Of course, yeah. I mean, we've just been called Lazarus by Dave there, coming back from the dead, as it were. It absolutely has, but I think you can confuse, you stick labels on stuff, people get confused and misinterpret. I think what we're about in terms of Atlas is, as I said, taking kind of that measurement superpower that you see on Facebook, which is based on real people, and taking that currency and putting it elsewhere. So call it ad tech, call it measurement, call it what you want. What we're doing is, I hope, driving greater effectiveness and efficiencies in advertising, cliche, but it's based on real people, which I think is a marked difference from the proxies which exist at the moment, which are cookies, essentially, which were great on desktop, but pretty useless on devices outside that realm.
And do you see that last? I mean, you've seen some acquisitions this year, like for instance, Microsoft buying LinkedIn, right? Buying sort of like that last sort of mile to the consumer. I mean, is that something you look at the other side as well? I mean, you obviously with Atlas, you're looking at the data part inside the sort of heart of the marketer or the agency. So, do you see that whole sort of holistic picture as well as just the media piece and the the other products you have?
Yeah, I think this Martech, ad tech, blurring the lines is all about single customer view, truly understanding who your customers are and how you enable that. I think the problem is it's complicated for good reasons and for bad reasons. Some of it's complicated because it's really smart technology and it takes time to put it together and make it work and make it simple. The other stuff, it's complex because people make a lot of money out of the complexity. I think the single customer view that we're talking about, where you marry what you know about your customer from a CRM perspective and marry that to both measurement and activation, is essentially where everyone wants to head, but it's not easy to get there. And I think you have marketers swimming in data and technology, but the one thing they're not drowning in is talent. We've got a real deficit there around technology and data skill sets.
Lara, from a marketer's perspective, how do you see that landscape? It's quite interesting because obviously you're the one who's got all the money. You're the most important person in the room.
Thank you.
Apart from me, obviously.
I can share the title with you happily. So I sit here, I guess, from both a publisher perspective and a marketer perspective, because obviously we're running programmatic across both. And it feels a little bit naive to say this after, Julie's presentation, but it does feel, AdTech and Martech does feel like two sides of the same stack to us. I mean, ultimately, what we are trying to do as publisher and as marketer is to reach, as we all know, put the right message in front of the right person at the right time and drive the right behaviors and hopefully do all of that in the most optimal way. From the sell side, optimal is maximizing yield. From the marketer side or the buy side, it's all about maximizing return. But ultimately, the strategy is the same, and we use the platforms we have at our disposal in order to achieve that.
Do you think your life as a marketer would be a lot easier if you had like a monolithic stack? Like, you just press one button and it all works. I mean, you must work with so many different pieces of technology. There's the argument to have the monolithic stack versus modularity because, the world is modular at the minute. But
Sure.
How do you see it? I mean, obviously one vendor can't do everything.
We love the idea or the promise of the one size fits all stack.
Really?
I mean, it's a great ideal, and
This
we
conference wouldn't
love
exist
to,
without we have
and
that.
we love to, we love it if that works. But in reality, the solutions that that come to us, typically, they have strengths and weaknesses. And those strengths and weaknesses typically come from the legacy of where the company comes from, which is typically either the sell side or the buy side. And so what we're trying to do is, we're trying to consolidate where we can, because we do like to have more simplicity when it comes to working with our tech platforms, and again, overlay the strategies, which we hope are clever enough on top of those platforms. But what we're seeing is we're having to work with the spectrum. So we work with the large players across, quite a bit of the stack. Then we rely on some specialists to kind of fill the gaps in terms of getting the sort of results that we need for our customers. And actually, increasingly, we're looking at building more solutions in-house as well. So all those three pieces are starting to work together to create the ideal stack for us, Auto Trader.
Damien, Facebook often get accused of being closed shop. every time someone brings it up, I'd say that's not true. I love Facebook, and but you know, obviously Atlas has a much more open view of the world. Do you think this kind of modularity can continue? I mean, does it? Like Terry was here last year, and you know, he talked about consolidation, and there was a lot of talk about consolidation, but it hasn't actually happened. We have more platforms and more solutions, more software providers than we ever had before. But do you think that is a sustainable future, or can the system continue to be like that?
I think you to ask that question about whether kind of this cohesive stack or a modular stack is the right one for here. I'm not sure it's the right question if you're a business. I think, you know, if you're asking the wrong question, you're going to get answers that are just irrelevant. I think what you're talking about here is what outcome are we driving to? And then that should define how you go about your choice of either modular components or a single stack. I mean, Atlas is open. I mean, you know, people talk about walled gardens and Facebook, but the antithesis of that is what we're doing with custom audiences on the Facebook property and the kind of offline actions product we have, which it marries, you know, any client's first-party data with what we have in a very kind of anonymized fashion, but you get genuine results out of that point to the impact of your digital marketing on offline spend, etc. That's a very open play in a secure environment where you kind of cross-match data first and third party. So, you know, I kind of think about people talking about walled gardens in that regard as just pointing at someone who's got more and better data than you have.
Well, hold on. But in fairness, though, I'm looking from our point of view, right? And it's kind of like I have all these different sort of data fiefdoms, if you will, right? You have Amazon, Google, Facebook. Give me a few more here. We know who the usual suspects are. Potentially, maybe Verizon, who knows, or some of the telcos. And for a market, that's a difficult situation because obviously with frequency capping and targeting, it becomes much harder. So, I mean, so from that perspective, that kind of world is going to be difficult for marketers. It makes it increasingly difficult for them. Do you not think that we need to sort of address that some way?
Agreed. I don't want to underplay how challenging it is to look across different players and how they have their own proprietary data and how that affects your ability to do X, Y, and Z. But, you know, you just have to be very rational as to why that exists. I mean, those individual companies you've just referenced have relationships with their users and customers, and they're bound by that. You know, there's an obligation for, you know, privacy, security, all of that. As soon as you start being loose or flexible around that, you open up to risk around that data and PII essentially. Yeah. So there is a way to kind of cross that divide in terms of your ambitions around reach and frequency, but they're not going to come tomorrow. They certainly won't come quickly.
But Chip, don't marketers hold the purse strings, like, you know? Are they pushing back against this, do you think?
Yes, marketers very much so want to take their data and ad dollars and be able to apply it to the media partner networks that they see a value and get access to that data. And rightfully so, Facebook wants to protect its access and user base. And I think there's an opportunity where companies like Facebook can enable brands to have access to their inventory and their people-based targeting, but do it in a controlled environment. And the benefit to the marketer being where they can see how their investment on Facebook performs right next to their investment on other media. And we're doing that with many different strategic ad network partners that have great data like Facebook does.
Yeah, and I think the key here is actually the data asset that none of the platforms or the publishers have, which is the actual marketer data. I mean, that really is the connective tissue across the industry. It's where a lot of marketers start when they think about data-driven strategy, and it's on the spectrum, it's the highest value, most scarce data that any brand can bring to bear on the market. It also happens to be, you know, sort of effectively free for them to leverage. So that piece, I don't think changes rapidly over time. I think that we sort of saw a good distance between marketers really wanting to put a lot of their data inside of Google because Google is a huge player for them in a lot of other spaces. So it's not clear to me that even though there are lots of pockets of proprietary third-party data out there from these big kind of walled garden platforms, that ends up being the single place where sort of data lives for a marketer.
But how do you resolve those problems? I mean, this is an issue that's is going to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah.
Right? The more of these walled gardens we see pop up, there's going to be more issues, particularly around how money is allocated, spend is measured, spend is targeted. I mean, as a company, how do you work with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a new challenge, to be honest. Like, I think that's been going on for quite a while in the industry. Certainly at Blue Kai, we thought that the DMP was a layer to be able to do that. But I also would challenge the idea that Facebook and Google kind of have a monopoly on identity. They certainly have a really strong asset and a play there. But we've focused really quite a bit on the idea that there needs to be an independent identity layer in the industry that people can use across walled gardens, that measurement works when you have strong identity across walled gardens and different types of devices. And so I don't think this game is over. I wouldn't write it off at all, that the end state is a place where there are less than a dozen platforms and media companies out there. I think we will have convergence, but I think the convergence is going to lead to platforms, not necessarily closed platforms.
Yeah. All right. And do you think that the cookie is dead? I know that's a very strong statement, right? Because obviously we have this new term, people-based marketing, which I'm still trying to get my head around.
Right.
But still, there's cookies involved somewhere along the line. So the concept of that, how does that sort of affect your business? I mean, it's very point about how you get data in and out is
Sure.
obviously an important thing. So how do you sort of bake that into what you're doing?
So I think for us, as Auto-Trader marketing, as well as on the sell side, representing car manufacturers who are marketeers across our site and on our data, it's a huge challenge. If you think about purchasing a car, it's a considered purchase. On average, it takes 3 to 4 months to complete. And that doesn't even include what we are calling sort of like the pre-in-market stage, the awareness stage, where you sort of know you're going to, you need a car, but you haven't quite started the process yet. But you're making a long list in your mind. I've been in that stage for about a year. If you think about the amount of time a person engages in this process and the sheer number of touch points, online and offline touch points, they're on Facebook, they're on Google, they're in and out of lots of sites, they're on our site dipping in and out. There's just so many touch points, and there's no one solution, and the last click is definitely not the right one, to measure success for any particular campaign. And so it's a big challenge, I think, for us, kind of understanding how we measure success across that customer path. But having said that, I'm actually in the process of
An RFP.
no. Oh, actually, maybe.
Fun time, a coffee break, huh?
We've
We'll
done
be
a
seeing Lara for the rest of the day to carry off with
We've done a few RFPs in the last year, I have to say. Now, I was going to say I've been reading some applications for an upcoming awards, and one of the categories is around sort of measurement of success and attribution. And there seems to be a lot of really interesting work out there in silos, and it was actually really encouraging to see the amount of research and thought and strategy that's going into understanding how campaigns work beyond click. And I'm just looking forward to seeing that becoming mainstream, really.
Damien, you're the measurement king, here, Damien, obviously with Atlas. Tell us your ethos. Because obviously, in fairness, you've always argued about agencies, not the silo activity of agencies was hampering good attribution, good measurement, etc. I mean, what's your sort of take on this? I mean, we're still seem to be living in that world.
Yeah.
Social, search, display, all the rest of it.
Yeah, I think we're at day one at the moment. I think talking about first-party data, it's incredibly valuable, but it's unequal in terms of access to it. So if you're a retailer and you own the endpoint where a product is sold, then you have the first party data to marry your digital marketing to it. If you're a big CPG or you don't own the retail channel, then that data belongs to someone else who's got the tills. And that's hard. That's a hard problem to address if you're a big, a Unilever or a Procter & Gamble. I think, it's very early days. We talk about all of these different silos, whether it's the buy-side silos, whether it's the sell-side silos. Hopefully where we're going with Atlas is the ability to measure all of it, and that's contingent on people allowing us to. And why will they allow us to measure it all? Is because we'll be able to illuminate how powerful their media sites or those publishers are in driving some sort of outcome that marketers value.
And what are the key problems to making that happen then?
It's just so early day for us. It's just so early days. People-based or not using a cookie-centric approach is so new. I mean, we're only kind of 18 months in, and that takes time to bed in within marketing departments. A lot of marketing departments, they're actually, the people who work there are paid on certain performance metrics that are all based on a cookie currency at the moment. So it's not just about ripping up your ad tech or your measurement platform. It's
Do you
about
think there's a systematic thing that needs to happen before all this happens?
Absolutely, and it's happening. It's underway, and it's probably going to be a bit of a slingshot where there's a lot of work going on, and then suddenly it will accelerate. Kind of tectonic plate, if you will, kind of moving slowly, but in a momentous fashion. I think that's happening. I've got a lot of confidence in it.
Chip, obviously you work with marketers and agencies. You've seen that problem as well. It was interesting. We had an event last week for marketers specifically. It just feels to me there is a lot of, even within the marketers themselves, a lot of solarization between various disciplines like CRM and your media execution and even your tech part, which is held by your CIO. Is that still a huge problem for you?
No, we have seen a shift in a trend over the last couple years where marketers are leaning in and deciding that they need to have a cohesive data strategy as well as a platform strategy for how they want to reach their customers. I think it does depend upon the ad vertical to what extent they go down deep down the Martech route. A lot of your biggest brand advertisers like the CPG manufacturers, they increasingly they dip their toe in Martech with data management platforms, but then kind of realize they may not be set up for it, or a lot of the scale they could get with ad tech platforms like ourselves that have audience-based management capabilities. But we are seeing brands all of a sudden they are taking the reins and making decisions on how they're going to drive their own technology and data strategy.
And they're working with you as well, are they? Directly?
Yes.
Right, via the
We work with brands and we work in partnership with agencies as well, but we're definitely seeing brands lean in much more this past 2 years than we have in years past.
And Chip, David, you must see a lot of this your side of the fence, because obviously your technology is sort of core Martech, if you will. Obviously the implementation and who you talk to and who's going to use it, that's still a significant problem.
Yep, totally. And it's a people problem, it's a process problem, it's a product problem. So I wouldn't say it's simple. I do think that we're making really good headway. I do think that the next 12 to 18 months, if you're an ad tech platform and you don't interoperate with CRM, you are going to be pretty irrelevant. I just think that CRM is critical path to a marketer, and it is critical path to the biggest the biggest publisher platforms in the world.
What would you say is more important, CRM or DMP?
I think it's a false dichotomy. I think the DMP space extends. The DMP is defined as a customer segmentation platform. It happens to have been based on a tool that we call a cookie, and it has evolved to a new tool we've called a mobile ad ID, and it will evolve to new types of identification mechanisms that the industry starts to leverage. So if there are two certainties, in the world of ad tech conferences is that we will never stop talking about measurement, and we will never stop talking about the death of the cookie.
Yeah.
And
yeah, here we still are.
And here we still are, right? So
Since 1993.
so I think that for folks in the room who are thinking about, am I Martech or ad tech, I think that those things start to really blur definitionally. And that's driven certainly by the marketer and what's important to them.
Now, I'm interested. Obviously, people are trying to sell to you all the time. You know, technology coming off your left, right, and centre. Your phone goes off in the morning at 8:30 and doesn't stop ringing until 12:30 because America's online, West Coast trying to ring you.
Emails, actually.
Yeah, emails. Yeah.
Lots of emails.
I mean, all these vendors send it to you. Do you think they really understand your business? Do they really understand how things work for you? I mean, like, I could rock up to you with a new piece of technology that Exchange Wire and Ad Exchange and all the rest of us have been writing up for 6 months, and you need this, you need this, you need this, and you're sitting there go, okay, I need this. Now I have it. What the hell do I do with it? What does it do? I don't even have people to run it. It's going to sit there and just gather dust. Is it a case that those companies don't understand sort of how, you know, change management, et cetera, within your company, or is that situation being changed?
I think for us, there is a bit, or for the companies that approach us, there's a bit of a tendency to simplify. So and we see this on both the ad tech and Martech, or the buy side and the sell side, if I'm really honest. On the sell side, we tend to be categorized as a publisher in the generic sense of the term, I guess, along the lines of sort of news publishers or media content providers. And on the Martech, on the marketing side, we tend to be put in like an e-commerce type of category. And actually, we're a very different business to that. We're basically a search and classifieds business, and we provide a service to car dealerships across the UK. And there's a bit of a struggle there sometimes, when we get all these calls and emails, and, occasionally we'll have a chat with them, and they're trying to put us into one of those categories, and it just doesn't work. And we love working with the vendors to kind of talk them through our business model and our commercial pressures, what we can and can't do from both sides of the space. But we tend to get pigeonholed a little bit. So, if there's an advice I guess I can give, it would be to, maybe work with us to think a little bit more about our business. In terms of, I guess, launching a new technology. So we've recently, well, not so recently, about a year ago, launched our data management platform. And it's probably lots of people in this room that have launched a data management platform or in the process of it.
Who is it?
It's one of those on the board earlier. So.
Oh, okay, good, yeah.
One of the big ones. And, for those of you who have been through this process, the build up to it, there's a bit, a lot of people think that this piece of kit is going to be the silver bullet, the fairy godmother that makes everything work. And when we started that process, we were inundated with the number of use cases from around the business. And all I can say to that is, we took, hopefully, what was a sensible approach to it, a phased approach. And we focused on the use cases that were going to deliver ROI kind of immediately.
Yeah.
And then now we're sort of in phase 3 of our DMP deployment. So we deployed it a year ago, but we're still building on it. And that's when we're starting to look at, site personalization, how it works with CRM.
But you took a sort of deep strategic look at this. You want to say, where am I going to get with this technology? I'm not just going to buy this. I want to know it's going to do X, Y, and Z.
Where I'm going with it, yeah. In 2 years' time, it's going to power this, that, the other thing, and something else that we maybe don't know yet, but we're going to be, try to be ready for it, try to make it future-proofed. It's not a one, with a lot of this tech, it's not you spend 3 months, you launch it, and then it's done. I mean, it's never done, really.
Yeah.
And so, that's how it is.
So we've got a big flashing red light here, unfortunately. But I want to finish one question. I mean, I know there's no agency panel today, unfortunately, but obviously we had the ANA report come out in the US a couple of months ago, and it caused an awful falafel, particularly around rebates. Now, obviously rebates are illegal in the US, but when it comes to doing business outside the US, this industry would fall apart without rebates. So, and that's a fact, and everybody in this room knows it. But I just want to know what's your perspective. I mean, will this change the relationships, and we'll start with Damien and we'll come back to Lara, but go through the lads. Will this change the relationship between the marketer and the agency? Are we going to see a change in culture there? Are we going to see new players come into the space, offering more transparency?
This is a really thorny subject,
Oh, of
which is
course it
probably
is.
why you're asking it. Look, I'm an ex-publicist myself, so, you know, what I saw when I was at an agency was thousands of people working damn hard to do a great job for their clients. I think it's got increasingly complex in terms of the media they're operating across, the skill sets required. There's a shortage all round. I think the agencies are doing their best in a very tough environment. I've always found the auditing process was a poor fit for digital. Back, 16, 17 years ago when we got our first when there's a pitch going on, you're asked, like, what's your pricing here? And they were asking us to price something that we didn't buy in terms of CPM when we were buying on a performance-based metric, or they had this blanket, how much do you pay for Yahoo? And the question we were thinking, Yahoo where? Like, which channel? So I thought that they just never got to grips back then, and I'm not sure the people who are marking the papers are necessarily up there to do so in terms of technical proficiency.
So you're saying the auditing firms are not up to it? Basically?
No, I didn't say that. I said not all the people are up to it from a technical
Just some-
perspective.
just
And I
some-
think it moves so fast that what you're trying to quantify in terms of value has so many different nuances. I think transparency is obviously a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that the industry, by and large, is pretty damn transparent versus other industries. And I think people are still trying to do a great job for clients, and I don't think that's going to change.
Chip.
So I think we're already seeing agencies adapt and adjust their service and business models, like recently with Dentsu Aegis Network acquiring Accordant Media, where they're bringing in a team that has been doing programmatic buying with platforms and takes a data-driven approach. And so that's going to enable Dentsu Aegis to scale that model. We see the same thing with Group M with its Group M Connect, where they have a transparent fee structure leveraging platforms like TubeMogul. I think you're going to see more and more of those service models that agencies will adopt, where they have technology and data at the foundation. But to Damien's point, it's a big shift and takes quite a bit of expert resource that needs to be trained or acquired into the agency.
Yeah, I mean, I also have an agency background. I came from Ogilvy prior, and I saw the same thing. Lots of, dedicated people working hard for their clients. I think there's a business model problem around the agencies and the way the brands think about how to use the agency and pay them, and it really shouldn't be, billable hours. I think that model needs to evolve. I also think some of the new players, like the consulting firms, are going to have stronger relationships at the C-suite, which is going to start to shake things up. And we've talked for a long time about are we selling to the CTO or CIO, or are we selling to the CMO? We've sort of thought for a while that this space sells to the CMTO, right? Like the Chief Marketing and Technology Officer as a new executive spot in an organization. And I think the Accenture type companies are going to have those kinds of relationships to bring the technology in to bear at these big organizations, but it's the agencies that are going to drive the use cases sort of day to day. And so I don't have an answer for where this plays out. I do think there's a really important role for the agencies around like use case development and actually taking the tech that we're all building and adding sort of that differentiated value add on top of it.
These are beautifully political answers, and I applaud all of you for that. They are brilliant, by the way. Good points, and actually not get involved in the thorny issue. Lara, leave the last with you, right, quickly, because we have to get off the stage because we've
Sure.
the father of the ad ceremony is going to do a presentation. So, grandfather, apparently. Sorry, grandfather. Go ahead. Give us the last word on this as quickly as you can.
So, in terms of the NA report, so with the marketeer's hat on, I guess we don't mind paying a margin if you give us good performance. Ideally, we'd like the transparency because we want to know how hard, data's work, how hard it's working, the campaign's working for us.
Would you consider, like, would you consider a new model if an agent rocked up to you and said, we can do X, Y, and Z, and we will increase your sales by this amount, and we will take no money, and we'll live and die by our margin on what we do for you? Is that something you'd be interested in? And obviously pay them a lot more money, like percentage of sales.
So it's about performance, but it's also about the transparency point. So we want to know, where our ads are and how hard they're working, and are they driving the right sorts of people to our site. So I don't think we could kind of divorce the two. I mean, I think it has to be, really good performance and the transparency issue. But quickly on this point, if I put my publisher hat on, obviously in the report there was no mention of the publisher side, which is the other end of that spectrum. And from that point of view, we are feeling a lot of those pressures as well, on price, on performance, on viewability, and taking some of that responsibility to solve some of the issues around ad blocking, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's hard for the publishers as well. I think we all have a part to play in kind of making this a more sustainable ecosystem.
Okay.
In all parts.
On that note, thank you very much, Lara. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Round of applause, please, for our audience. Thank you very much.